Hello, everyone. Apologize for our issues today, technical issues, and I am trying to um, get it resolved. I'll get our guests back on here momentarily, and we will get things back on the road um, and hopefully be able to get this resolved. Um, so bear with me as we overcome this technical issue, and we will get it figured out. Let's see here. Technology is always rather interesting, isn't it? We bear with me here again as I try to help people get what they need to be able to get back online with us. And we're getting there. Be patient with me if you would, please, as we do this, and we'll get there. Let's see here. Thank you for your understanding. As you can tell, I am working this just as we go. And we'll get it there. Bear with me here. All right, so we're making progress.
We're
All right.
live. We're live. We're there.
Yeah, I know. I decided to go ahead and go live and make.
I'm glad you did. I'm like, who's he talking to? Is Kevin talking to himself right now? I think LinkedIn
broke
broke Kevin's brain.
Yeah, well, there are those days, and hopefully Michael has gotten the link. I know we're live, so okay. Now then, we're getting there. I see Dr. Jesmond. Thank you for joining, and I think Sharon is still with us. I dropped the link in the old one, so hopefully this is all going to come together, and we'll get Michael in here hopefully soon.
I'm sure he'll be here in a minute, but thank you all for your patience. And
this is technology.
I feel your pain right now, Kev. I feel your pain. All you want to do is deliver quality stuff to people, and you prepare and you do all the right things, and then you click the button and it just doesn't work. And folks, we appreciate your patience. But just a little refresh. We're talking today about being kind of a supporting leader. Right, we deal with a lot of stress at Perspective Force, and supportive leadership is one of the most, it's one of the biggest keys to make sure that team members are not burning out, both at home and at work. We discussed a little bit about strategic flexibility as a term instead of using hybrid work or remote work. We mentioned an article that's called it strategic flexibility, and Michael covered a little bit of a story and basically allowed us to get a glimpse into his experience with it. And I'd love to hear what you think about that term, strategic flexibility versus just remote work or hybrid work. And if you want to see the article, you can see it down there below. Shout out to, I think it's Jothan, I'm not sure how to say that name, but it's like Jason, but TH instead of
J-Fan.
I've never seen that before.
That's really cool. And by the way, Karen, thanks for hanging in there with us, and Sharon, and really appreciate you helping hang in there, and we'll get it going here, and we'll get Michael back in momentarily. So
what are your thoughts on this one, Kev? What does strategic flexibility make you think about that term in general?
All right, got to get my brain shifted back from technology to that.
Deep breath.
Deep breath. Welcome, Emmanuel from Kenya. Thank you for joining. I like the term. I really do like strategic flexibility, because when we look at just the remote work or any of these other terms, it, for me, implies the idea that we're going to just do one broad stroke thing, and everybody's going home or everybody's going into the office, and I don't think that that is going to be the best way to approach it. That we have to be strategic about it. And in fact, article I co-wrote with Tisha Nyhorster a couple of months back looks at the implications of the whole work from home question. And there are a lot of elements to it. And I'm also convinced that how we approach this conversation, if we're not strategic, it's going to blow up the workforce and really cause a lot of turmoil and crisis. I don't mean to sound like I'm trying to build fear, but I just think we're at a place where we've got to be strategic. So yes, I like the term strategic flexibility because I think we got to be that way with it.
And you can take the article off. I mean, I think people got the point. But I think that leads me into our conversation today of being a supportive leader. Being a supportive leader requires you to think ahead. It requires you to be prepared for what's around the corner. One of my great mentors said, great leaders are able to see around corners. They're able to see what's not right in front of their face, what's not just in the immediate future. It's what's coming up, right? And many, actually, not many, I should say some, had already started going into hybrid or strategically flexible work
Right.
even before this happened, and it was a seamless transition for them. And I was talking about, I just started a new job before we were able to go live, and there is the city built a humongous building, but they can't use it because they've been shut down since March of 2019. This massive, glorious building that's right next to the municipal courthouse, and they're not able to use it, and they're trying to figure out. But for the first time, I experienced this thing. I showed up for work, and I don't have a desk. Like, I don't have an assigned cubicle. I don't have an office. It was like, whoa, this is so strange. It's so weird. It was different because I haven't worked for somebody in like 3 years. So it was just a different experience for me. But I like it. I really like it. I think they're trying their best to figure out how can we use this space more strategically. And one thing I would say with strategic flexibility in office space, think about it like a hotel space, right? Where people come in and they temporarily hang out in an area. But how can you get away from using, and this ties into being supportive leadership, how can you get away from, okay, we have X amount of bodies in the building. We need X amount of desks, X amount of cubicles, X amount of office space. Instead, how do we use this space to best serve our people, the needs of our people that we have? Maybe we expand gyms. Maybe we expand, different spaces that allow people to de-stress. Maybe we expand, areas that can for people just to hang out. Because we talk a lot about, well, there is some negative aspects of working away from, of working at home. There are guys, especially for extroverts. Introverts are probably fine. We're excited. I am one, guilty. But extroverts, they're feeling, isolated. They're feeling like, what do we do? So companies are trying to figure out, how do we get people to the office, but not mandate it? Allow people to come there because they want to. Support them in that way. So think about creating a space that makes people want to be there, encourages conversations. Because one of the biggest things that I talk about is you can't replace water cooler talk online. Right? That's just that chit chat that makes people feel part of a community. And we need to support, as leaders, we need to support extroverts in that way. But I want to pose a question to all of you. I want to ask you, what does it mean for you to be a supportive leader? Either yourself being that way, or if you have leaders in the past of showing you support, or maybe the opposite of it. What does it mean for you to be a supportive leader? How do you want to demonstrate it, or how have you seen it be demonstrated in the past?
And welcome to Jake Shan. He's been with us before, so welcome aboard. Oh, there's Michael. All right.
Hey there, guys.
I think it might actually be coming together in spite of us.
Awesome. Good.
We'll kick it off right away, and I asked this question to the audience so they can chime in as well. But I want to hear, in your experience, right? What does it mean to be a supportive leader? Like in any aspect of that word, whether it's something that you teach other leaders to be, something that you are yourself, or something that you've seen from other leaders in your time.
Hey, Michael, before you jump in that, welcome Dinesh from Kenya. So you got it, Michael.
Yeah, Anton, I appreciate that question. And you being a Marine as well, I'll just tell you that I learned servant leadership in the Marine Corps. And I know when I say that, a lot of people are kind of surprised by that. They think it's all about rank structure and authority and command and control. You were told, you're given an order and you just follow it. And yeah, I acknowledge rank is important and all that's, certainly prevalent there. But a servant leader, a person that is willing to serve those, or in the words we're using today, support those that they're leading, it brings with it this. In all of my leadership teaching, I use this definition, working definition of leadership: influencing others towards a shared goal.
Mm.
I use the word influencing because it carries with it this notion of a willingness to follow. And when you lead with title or authority or position or rank, you're not going to get that willingness to follow. People may just follow you out of fear or obligation or something like that, but they're not willingly following you. But when you kind of turn that around and you are serving or you are supporting those that you're leading, now you get that willingness to follow. Now you get the level of a loyalty that you're looking for as a leader. You get the level of effort that you're looking for as a leader, because they're willingly doing the things that you're asking them to do.
Yeah. And welcome, Esther from Holland. Glad to have you. Let's, Karen offers comments. An excellent point, Anton, that you make about creating that space that generates engagement and connection with each other, the team and the company. Yeah, and finding out what that is. Again, avoid the ping pong and pool table and yoga, unless they fit. If they fit,
Right.
That's outstanding. And Michael, you talk about, I have a similar working definition of servant leadership, and talk about influencing others through shared vision. Same general concept. And I think the more that we do that, the more effective we're going to be. And, one of the current challenges in the workforce that everybody complains about is loyalty or lack of it.
Right.
And when you develop this form of leadership, and because it's a shared vision, it's not just our vision. It's not just my vision. It's our vision. And when people buy into it, then they're not just doing this for me or the organization. They're doing it also because it serves who and what they are.
Yeah.
Well said, guys. I mean, and I just want to pose this to the audience again. If you're just joining, we're talking about, being a supportive leader. What does that mean, whether it's in time of stress or in general? And I'd love to hear your version of it. What does it mean to show support? What does that look like in general? And last week we talked about being a caring leader. And really what we're slowly building out here is the results pyramid in leadership. Because a lot of times, I'll remind what we talked about last week, leaders are ready to jump into action. They're ready to get their employees, team members to do some things to accomplish a certain result. But I like how you use the word influence, because that's not just about action. There is earlier steps to have to take in order for me to be influential with my team. And those are relationship. That's at the very bottom of the results pyramid. We have to create the right experience for our team members through care and support and knowing them very well in order to be able to then create the right belief that makes them want to follow us, right? I agree with that, following without a title. Like that was, I think, Kevin, you may know is it Andy Stanley? What's the author's name? I think
You're talking about Andy Stanley, pastor.
He wrote a book.
Yep.
I think he wrote Leading Without a Title. And it's one of my favorite concepts when it comes down to that. It's, can you get these people to do what you need them to do? Not because you told them to, but because they see that you care, you support them, and they want to, because they know that you have their best interest in mind.
Yeah.
Well, even in, I see the military environment is closer in general terms to traditional management, because we have rank and authority, and we can, if needed, look people in the eye and say, look, see this on my chest? You're going to do this because of this rank. But if that's the way we're leading, even in the military environment, that's a poor way of leadership. In fact, if I'm leading correctly in that environment, I should be able to remove that rank tab and get things done and never even have to reference it, never even have them look at it, just because they buy into what's going on. comment from Karen. She says, ding, ding. I like that. I have to remember
Yes.
that. Relationships are the core foundational elements to any organization's success. Yeah. And if a person, whatever title, boss, manager, you give them whatever title, if they don't recognize that relationship and work from that vantage point, all they're doing is leading by authority, and they're not going to last long, just to be blunt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Kevin and Karen, thank you so much for that comment too, because, and Anton, I know you said it earlier that leadership is about relationship. And I say that all the time. Anyone that ever listens to my leadership teaching, my podcast, I assure you, you're going to hear me say that leadership is about relationship. It's not about title or authority or rank, like we just talked about. I mean, if, like you're saying, Kevin, if you're leading with your title, that is a very short-lived leadership, right? People will follow that for only a very short time. And if you want that longevity, if you want that loyalty that we all desire as leaders, then you're going to have to start with supporting your team members. And when you support your team members, that has to be accompanied by a relationship that you're building with your team members. Because if you're not building that relationship, then the team members don't necessarily connect with or understand your motives for the actions you're taking or the decisions you're making. We at Credible Leaders, we boil it down to an equation that has 4 components: credibility, competence, motives, and relationship. Relationships and motive, they both play into this idea of supporting your team. And you've got to get in there. You've got to be vulnerable with your team members. You've got to build the relationships with them such that when you take action or build or make decisions, they're not questioning your motives. They know you're doing it. I think you said it, Anton. They know you're doing it because you have their best interest at heart, not your own as the leader.
Yeah. Anton, let me pop these up. Couple of comments. Dinesh, my apology, or Dinesh. Either way, Dinesh, if I'm pronouncing it wrong, please correct me. But he talks about leadership isn't a position, a title, but readiness to mentor, influence, and serve as an example. And the key point he makes here that's so powerful is the power of an effective leader is their example, their role modeling. Mm-hmm. And once a leader understands that, it changed. That's a real game changer.
That's right.
And then Karen makes a comment. Karen, I'd forgotten that you were a veteran. Thanks for your service and appreciate you. And if you haven't earned that respect, there's you're failing, no doubt about it. So let's see. Anton, you had a comment. I saw you getting in gear there. So
honestly, I'd rather make it about the audience and
okay.
myself. Sharon got a great comment here. If you want to pop that one up.
Yeah, Sharon.
I'll spin off of that one once you read it.
Sharon says last manager had was the best leader I ever worked with and for. He gave the team the correct tools to do what they needed to do, and he was there if they needed help. He supported everyone and allowed individual growth. So key.
And that last part, when she says that individual growth, the key word individual, right? And me and Kevin talk about this. There's no formulas. There's no one size fits all. Even there's principles, just like you have, Michael, your 4 principles or pillars or whatever they may be called. Mm-hmm. But it's understanding your people's individual needs and how to tailor to them to provide the right kind of support. Support may be development for some, right? Give me growth in my professional sense. Teach me what to do. Teach me my next role. To some, it may be flexibility, like we talked about with schedules, that kind of support. Maybe they want to grow outside the company and they want to take some courses and they want to do some things. Maybe they're a single parent and they need to be, some places for their kids, and the amount of stress it creates for them trying to juggle those things at once without worrying what their leader is going to think if they're not there by at 5 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon, evening, whatever you want to call it. So I really like that point on the individual component.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there, Anton. Support for each of your team members looks different depending on which team member you're supporting. It's much like appreciation, right? When you want to express appreciation to your team members, all of them will likely receive appreciation in different ways. Some of them will love the idea that you call out their name in public, in a big setting, and others that just mortifies them that you've called their name in public. And you have to know that about your team. And the same is true of supporting your team. And you have to know them as individuals. And that goes back to that building relationships, with them. I know I've led other leaders before, and to use a military analogy, since so many of us here are military. I had one leader that I could just say, I need you to take that hill. And his response would be, okay. Boom. And that's all the support I needed to give him. He was just off and running. Another leader, doing much the same job. If I said, go take that hill, why that hill? Well, do you want me to go this way? Or would you rather me do this? Or he needed detail, right? One leader didn't need all those details. One leader did. He needed to understand all the details and all the why. And as their leader, I had to have a good enough relationship with them both to recognize that supporting one meant something totally different than supporting the other. And that was only built over time through building those relationships with them.
Yeah, I think about, again, boy, I know we're going to have to be careful about going military on everything, but as a leader, one of the things that I value from my leader above me or whatever that I am working with is we use it in orders, and it's called commander's intent. Okay. That goes to helping me understand the motivation of my leader. It helps me understand when it's in question, because we know there is no textbook way to get everything done. And so when it comes to those moments that it's not in the book, so to speak, but if we understand commander's intent or a leader's vision or the goals, however you want to express it, then we can respond with confidence that we're still moving how we need to move, or that at a minimum, if we do it wrong, we can come back and say, well, this is the best I understood what you intended, and so on. And it makes for a very different approach and opens up both motivation and initiative, in my book anyway. You guys buy into that?
Yeah, I totally do. And I totally understand, the idea of commander's intent. And I think one of the most important things that the idea of commander's intent does for your team is it answers the question, why? One of the most important things you can do as a leader in supporting your team is always be ready with the answer to the question, why? Right? You're making a decision. You should anticipate someone asking, well, why that decision? And you're supporting your team by providing, that background, that reason why you've made that decision, or we need to take that action, or why that date is so important, or why this project, must be on track or on budget. Answering those why questions is a huge support for your team. And I think commander's intent covers that.
Go ahead, Kev.
Well, it just clicked in my brain. Anton knows that I talk about how the kind of the defining concept of my generation for management is when there was a question or doubt, the answer was because I told you so.
Right.
Okay.
I heard that from my dad a few times.
Yeah. You'd never know that I had heard it a time or two. So, but you just hit on it. The answer to the why cannot ever. Right. Oh, well, no, I back up. 99% of the time shouldn't be because I told you so. There are moments, and, especially in the military, but even in corporate environment, where we need somebody, we say go, and they start moving. But that's rare. Most of the time, there is even if it just takes a minute or two to answer the why effectively, with a few sentences even goes a long way, rather than just say, because I told you so. That's a bad answer, but it's also goes to heart of a mindset and an attitude that I think we've got to help leaders shift in. Okay, Anton, I'm sorry I jumped in there.
No, you're fine. I just think that in my perspective, you may disagree with me, fellas, but I think that leadership now is tougher than it used to be in the past.
Mhm.
Because I told you so was an acceptable answer in the past. People just took it as is. Now, were they motivated? Were they, as empowered as they could be? Absolutely not. But they picked up on when they went and did it. Nowadays, people are like, no, like, tell me the why, but it's gotten deeper. We've gotten away from a collectively focused society into more individualized society. So if you really want to take it to the next level as a leader, why for me? Answer that question, right? It's not just why are we doing this as a company? How does this benefit? What's in it for me? And not just from an external motivator standpoint. I think that society, people are becoming very, very intrinsically motivated, especially after everything we've gone through over the last few years. People are starting to become much more than they were in the past. It's not just about money. It's not just about dangling the carrot or the stick of being fired. It's really inspiring their passion, connecting it to, as Kevin says, their vision. And so if leaders want to get the best, why for me as an individual?
Let's see. Got a comment from Sharon. Always, by the way, all of you would love to hear your comments. We'll talk all day long, but we would rather focus on your comments. So many managers or supervisors would respond because I told you so. Sharon's referencing back to memories. And now that's not an acceptable answer. I want to know why as well. Be honest with your team. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And Anton, I think you're spot on in that leadership is certainly a lot different these days. And because I agree with you, back in my dad and my granddad, especially in his day, corporate leadership especially was just about just telling people what to do and just go do it. And to a lot of degree, the society as a whole was just kind of that mindset. Well, my boss said, go do it. I'm going to go do it. And so, yes, it's a different leadership challenge today, but I would submit to you that it's a better situation to be in, because in those days, if you will, back in the day, then let's say a team had a problem to solve. Well, back in those days, it was only going to be the leader that thought of the ideas to solve that problem. And then he just told, that team what to do, and they went and did it. Well, that may not have been the best idea. But in today's world, just because of exactly what you're talking about, Anton, is that because I told you so is not acceptable anymore. I need to understand, well, why are we doing this? Now you get more input, you get more ideas from your team on what is the best solution to solve that problem. So instead of just the entire corporation relying on me and my idea for the solution, now we're relying on the ideas of all the team members in solving that solution or that problem with the best solution. And that's a better world to be, living in my opinion, is that cooperative, supportive role as a leader. When you have all these ideas coming from your team, you have more confidence as a leader that you're taking the right steps because all of your team have had input into that, and they bought into it because it's their idea.
So, yeah, there's a balance there because I understand Anton's comment. Right now, we've got actively 6 generations functioning out there that have to be led in the workforce. And that alone is pretty intimidating. And those generations are, especially between the boomers and the Gen Zs, are very disparate in the way they're motivated and so on. And so it's going to take more time and effort to navigate that as a leader. But as you say, Michael, the value is rather than managing as a leader, it's no longer just you that carries the responsibility. If we're doing it right now, there are still some so-called leaders that are trying to shoulder everything in terms of making it happen. Now, I do have to be in a real big leadership trainer. The responsibility is always the leaders, but the function can be shared among the team. And in fact, I tell leaders, if you haven't become effective in delegating, you're not leading, you're managing. But the value of delegating is, hey, I don't like to do X. but I know that this team member really has a strength in that area, so I'm going to delegate them to be doing X.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that Jimmy Collins in Creative Followership talks about. And he even suggests that as a follower, if you know the person you're leading doesn't like to do X, whatever X is, as a great follower, you go to them and say, okay, I'll do this, whatever that is for you. Mm-hmm. Even initially, if you don't like it, because at some point, hopefully you build the capacity to be able to hand it off to others or whatever. But in the moment, an effective follower goes to the leader and says, you don't like to turn those screws that way. Okay, I'll turn those screws for you. And it makes a huge difference, because then you're appreciated as a follower and you're part of making it happen. There's so many dynamics there.
And we're touching on some great points, but I also want to make sure that we're balanced, right? And the stuff that people don't talk about often in these kind of podcasts is the negative aspect of leadership. Sometimes you got to get people to do things they don't want to do, bottom line. Because if all you do is have them be happy and have them perform, you'll be like me, who lost 5 team members in, March of 2015. I'll remember that month forever. 4 out of 5 cried in my office as they were leaving and quitting, not because it was my fault as a leader. They loved me as a person, but they weren't making the money they needed to make. They weren't able to feed their families. They weren't able to do things. So sometimes we have to be tougher as leaders and still get people to do things. But that's where being a supportive leader comes in. And that's what I'm hearing from what you guys are saying. I'll be by your side when you're doing this. I'm going to help you out as you do these things that you don't want to do. One of the things was lead generation that in my sales leadership times that people didn't want to do. And instead of just, pushing them to do it or finding ways to influence them to do it, I would just kind of let them go along and be happy, keep developing, hoping that enough development would push them to do it, but it never did. So after that happened, I was like, you know what? Let me go get on the floor with you. Let me go and make some of these phone calls. Let me do some of this stuff with you and be by your side to support you, and maybe even give you a few leads of my own just to help you get that confidence and support you that way, so you can get better at doing what you don't love doing, but is a necessity of your job.
Yeah, and Anton, accountability is essential. And I know every time I start talking about servant leadership with my peers, they roll their eyes and they go to the notion of group hugs and singing Kumbaya and all that stuff.
Right.
And they say, oh, well, I've got to give up on standards. And I say, absolutely not. Not at all. You're just going to help people follow you into those standards in a little different fashion. And one of the keys there you mentioned, Anton, is, okay, I'm got to hold you accountable, but as the leader, I'm going to walk with you through it. Again, it's different than pointing and say, go do. Why? Because I said so. It's go do, but because I know it's not your strength or your whatever, I'm walking with you through it. Very important.
Yeah. Guys, I couldn't agree with you more. And I encounter this all the time, especially from corporate executives that feel like, oh, well, you're talking about being a servant leader or a supportive leader. And what you're trying to do is you're just trying to make everybody happy. And they're just coming to work and they don't have any kind of real challenges or urgency. And they're just all happy. And that's not it at all. A supportive leader, a servant leader, is still one that very much pushes and challenges the team. But the difference is you're in it with the team. I shared earlier in my definition, a shared goal. And for me, that word shared has 2 meanings. One, it means communicated, right? I have to tell you what the goal is, but shared also in this sense of togetherness. We are in this together, right? I'm not the leader that just pushes you to unrealistic expectations. No, I'm in there with you. I'm supporting you as well. And I'm being just as aggressive and just as urgent, and I'm pushing and challenging myself just as much as I am you. So a supportive or a servant leader has nothing to do with not challenging people, not delivering results, and not working with a sense of urgency. It's just a matter of you're in there doing it with them is the difference.
Definitely. A couple of comments from our audience. Dinesh indicates he's read a good book called The Leader Who Had No Title by Robin Sharma. Not familiar with that, but it sounds like a good one. It emphasizes on impacting your team positively as a leader, and positive perception of a problem so they get included. Yeah. The more that we engage our team in attacking the problem, the better off we are for them and us. And then let's see, Karen. Karen, I love that. Ding, ding, ding. Yeah, I'm going to have, maybe I need to get a little one of those desktop bells for us to use during the broadcast, ding, ding, ding. Michael Tanner.
I think they make technology for that now. You don't got to use
it. Some old school things just come up still. What can I say? You're so correct about how things used to be back in the day. Being able to recognize strategies that come from different individuals who may be operating on different levels is a benefit and a strong attribute. Oh yeah, and part of the challenge of being an effective leader is you got to have a level of confidence. And if you don't, you're going to be defending yourself all the time. And that is a bad place to be.
Karen's comment, because she's got
that's what I just saw. Okay. So Karen has a question. All right. Okay. And so we're going to get to test our ability here. She says that she's talking about the teams that the team do things they don't want to do, getting them to do that. She wants to know, how do you approach your team to get them to do these things when you know several are sensitive individuals? Do you apply one size fits all approach, or do you go against the grain and make your approach individual? Oh boy. Who wants to have that?
I know Michael has a good one for it.
Okay.
So, Karen, you're going to hate me when I answer this question, because questions like this, I often will answer with a question, right? And because as a teacher of leadership, I often get a question in this form. How would you deal with a situation where blank, right? And you're asking in that form, right? You've got a task to be done. No one wants to do it. How do you lead in a way that you're going to get these people to do something that they don't want to do? And I always ask the question, I apply the golden rule to that. Well, how would you want to be led in that situation? If there was a task you didn't want to do and your leader was trying to get you to do it, how would you want them to lead you into that? And so when I ask myself that question, then that leads me into identifying, well, okay, how would I lead these people in this situation? And in the context of your question, you could have one of two scenarios. You could be leading a group of people to do some task, or you could be leading individuals. In the question that you ask, if I'm doing a one-on-one, meeting with someone to ask them to do something they don't like to do, then yes, I'm probably going to, as much as I can, tailor that leadership in that moment to the relationship that I know that I have with that person. But one of the things that I'm almost certain that I'm going to do, just because I know it's the way I would want to be led, I'm going to be honest and even out loud and vulnerable about the fact that I know I'm asking you to do something that you don't like to do. I'm not going to hide from that fact. I'm not going to skirt around that. I'm going to acknowledge that out loud to you, because a lot of times what that does, and I teach this as well in like conflict resolution and difficult conversations, when you just out loud acknowledge the emotion that person is probably feeling, you instantly take their defenses down, right? And so if you just acknowledge, look, I got something to ask you to do here, and I know you're not going to like to do this, but here's why. I'll also answer the question why. But if you'll just do those things, if you'll not acknowledge out loud the feeling of probably don't want to do this, and you'll answer the question thoroughly, why this is important, why this needs to be done, why this person needs to do this, because they've got the best skill to do it or whatever it might be. But if you'll answer that question of why, and you'll acknowledge the emotion in it, it brings those defenses down. And I believe, especially if the relationship is there, they trust your motives in asking them to do something that they don't want to do. And they're more willing to do it when that's the case.
Kev, if I can jump in on this one real quick.
Yep, jump in there.
Jump off right at 10, and you guys can keep talking, obviously. What I hear right now is a symptom. right? If this is something that is happening recurrently, we often try to treat the symptom. And instead, we got to dig deeper. And we've already mentioned this R word numerous times. If, as a leader, somebody's having a hard time getting people to do something they don't need to do, but they must do, most likely the relationship isn't built. We're trying to get to actions before experiences and beliefs have been set properly by this team, before this leader. And if that's the case, we have to rebuild it and come back down. Now, sometimes that's going to happen. And I think Michael answered that really well, that we have to get them to do things they don't want to do. Sometimes being vulnerable, because if you have a good relationship and saying, I need you to do this for me, this is something you don't like doing. And that's maybe not a popular statement. Like, what do you mean? You're a leader. They shouldn't, it's not about you. I'm like, I get it. But if I've actually established a relationship with this person and I'm being vulnerable that I don't have anybody else that can do this task as well as you can, or I just don't have the availability on the schedule to get this covered, like I need a solid, I'm being honest, I've screwed up, I've not covered something, I've not prepared. I need you to back me up here. Can you do that for me? And I think that often, because leaders don't have the relationship to be able to pull sometimes, right? You can make a withdrawal from that, metaphorical bank account that you build between an employee and a leader. Sometimes it's okay to make a withdrawal if you've made enough deposits in the first place.
Yeah. And one thing I'll kind of cue in on there, Anton, is maybe what we need to do is, you're not doing that for me. You're doing it for the team.
Here you go.
And because if we're doing it right, it's not just for me, it's for the team.
Sure.
Now, I know we're up against time, our near 12 o'clock. Now, Anton, you said you need to scoot.
I got to run. If you guys want to keep chatting, I got another meeting.
I'm happy to hang out with you, Kevin.
Yeah, okay. Well, I was going to say, we've got another 20 minutes or so for the hour total. So we'll continue on, Michael, if that's all right. And so,
it's been a
Anton,
pleasure.
thanks, brother.
Hoorah.
Here.
See you, Anton.
Karen, I have to concur with Anton, and it hopefully at the point that you're dealing with this situation, you've already dealt with the root cause of sensitivity, because your people on your team are secure. And if they're secure in the relationship with you and with the team, any of us, the more secure we are, the less sensitive or defensive we are. And so if we have that option, like Anton said, we may just have to say honestly, hey, we need you to step up in this case. But now there are situations where you're not at that relationship point. And like Michael says, if you really acknowledge people and let them know that you understand, it goes a long way towards overcoming that sensitivity. You've acknowledged it, you've agreed it's even valid, and so on. Then from there, you can make the ask. And sometimes that's even the way we build that relationship. Because one of my favorite things is, hey, when you get dirty and sweat and get tired together, that's when you become a team. That's that's no longer me, it's us, and makes a big difference.
Yeah, Kevin, as Anton was saying that, and as you were describing that too, this is one of those areas in my leadership coaching. I'll have clients that they're skeptical of this idea of build these relationships, right? And in their leadership, they'll come up with one of these scenarios, like they've got to tell, a team member to do something they don't like to do, or they've got to deliver some bad news of some sort, poor performance review, or resolve a conflict. And, I will coach them through that situation. And then after the fact, I'll get an update from them. How'd it go? And this, that, and they're usually talking about how rough it went or something. And I will then pose this question to them. Imagine how much better that would have gone if you had a good relationship with that person, right? And that's when the dots get connected, and they're like, yeah, you're right. If that person wasn't questioning my motives, if that person wasn't questioning why I picked them to do this task that's so bad, because when you don't have that relationship, that person you're asking to do something that they don't like to do, there's no context for them. And so
Mhm.
when there's no context and no clarity, they make up the worst case scenarios in their mind. And so when you have no relationship and you say, hey, I need you to do this for me, and that's all you say, they're making up the worst case
Mhm.
scenarios. Well, why did he make me do this? Doesn't he know I hate doing this? Why is he picking on me?
Yeah.
Does he not like me in some way? They're making up the worst of stories in their mind because they don't have that relationship with you. And these kind of scenarios is where relationship pays dividends for any kind of leader.
Oh yeah, and what's interesting and is that one of the big complaints with the younger generations in the workforce now is they have no loyalty and they're not dependable.
Mhm.
And the reason I believe that occurs is because that a lot of the managers, leaders, whatever title you give them, have not understood the power of developing that relationship. And because my experience, because my leadership journey, especially, I formalized and became clearer in my head dealing with with students, high school
Mhm.
students.
Right.
And leading high school students is like herding cats.
Mhm.
But once we developed that relationship, the dynamic of the leadership changed remarkably.
Yeah.
And I was shared last week as we talked about caring. That was the beginning step. When they understood that even when I had to hold them accountable, it
Mhm.
wasn't because I didn't like them or just being a pain in the neck or whatever. It was because I really cared about them. And oh, by the way, I care about the group, the team.
Yeah.
And when we can share that, that makes a huge difference for everybody, and
Mhm.
is so important. So, Michael, any thoughts on, as we are kind of winding down, some practical tips on supportive leadership? I know we've talked about several things, but
Yep.
got
Yeah.
any
Yeah,
specific?
definitely. Well, and I'd also like to address that. You made mention that today's workers they're viewed as lacking loyalty and lacking hard work and that kind of thing. And I'm pretty vehemently of the opinion that that's a leadership problem, not a millennial problem or Gen X problem or whatever. That's a leadership problem when your team members, no matter what generation they are,
As Karen
are
would
viewed
say,
that way.
ding, 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 ding.
Yeah. Well, and here's where I get this from too. I've studied there's a gentleman, his name is Colonel Fife, and he was a tank commander in the Army in World War II, in the Korea and Vietnam War.
Wow.
And I actually heard him talk about the Vietnam War, and someone asked him the question about leading draftees versus volunteer, right?
Okay.
And his response was, I couldn't hardly tell the difference. Right now, wait a minute. We're talking about the Vietnam War, and
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about a young man, 18 years old, 20 years old, and he was forced into this war. He didn't
Right.
volunteer. He was forced into this war. What do you mean you can't tell the difference? Because he was leading them all the same way, right?
Right.
And he was very much a proponent of servant leadership and so forth. And so I would just submit to all the leaders out there, don't blame your team members.
Yeah.
It's not because of what generation they are or where they came from, or it's on you as the leader. Take ownership of that, and you as the leader can certainly make the difference. You can make them the most loyal
Mm-hmm.
of team members that you've ever experienced. So yeah, I just when you were talking about that, I was like, oh, I got to say, this is a leadership issue.
It is.
It's not a generation issue.
Yeah, it definitely is. When I teach leadership, I say, whatever's going on with your team, the first stop that you should always make, I don't care what it is that's going on, good, bad, or indifferent, is check your mirror.
Yeah.
Because if you are leading as you're capable, okay, that's a key thing, is that as you apply these principles and you lead in accordance, it becomes your responsibility. The good news is, though, you as a leader have the power of influence and
Right.
modeling that can bring about effect without having to go into authority and all that.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, it's if there's a problem on the team, first place, hold the mirror up and say, okay, what's
right.
my part in this?
That's right. And the beauty of that is as the leader, when you take the ownership of that,
Mm,
now you have control to change it.
yeah.
But if you pass the ownership over
Mhm.
to, well, that's because I've got a bunch of millennials on my team. Well, now you can't control that anymore.
Right.
But if you take on the ownership of this and you lead this team, now you can control it. Now you can make the positive change that's necessary in your team. And that's so important as a leader. But Kevin, I think what I would say about this idea of supportive leadership, I mentioned earlier that we teach 4 components of leadership, and
Right.
we put it together in an equation so that we can measure leadership effectively. And those 4 components are credibility, competence, motive, and relationship. And as it relates to servant leadership, or as it relates to supporting your team, motive and relationship, those are the 2 primary components of our equation that apply to you supporting your team. And we've talked about it enough, I think, in this hour on the idea and the importance of building relationships with your team members. And then motive, that's your reason why. Why do you want to be a leader? Right?
Mhm.
Are your reasons for being a leader, are they selfish or selfless? Right? Do you
Mhm.
want to be a leader so that you've got the prestige and you have the title, maybe you have the compensation or whatever? Or is your leadership about, I want to see the team win. I want to
Mhm.
see people succeed, a selfless leadership. And so if your motives are selfless and you build relationships with your team, then you can be rest assured you're supporting your team the way you need to as a leader.
Yeah. In fact, again, one of the crucible for servant leadership for me was teaching.
Mhm.
And I've been in leadership roles but prior to that, but never fully grasped the concept the way I do now. But one of those things that I did that made a huge difference was taking the time to share the vision that I had for
Mhm.
my students, and then also tied that vision into the vision that the school had for them.
Yeah.
Because when I invest that time and the vulnerability, because that gets a little personal.
Mhm.
But when you invest that, you have just given a support mechanism to your team, because one of 2 things will occur. Either they will share some part of your vision and get on board, or they'll go, this is not where I need to be. And then as a leader, boy, I get real radical with this,
Mhm.
is, in an organizational or corporate structure, at that point, you say, okay, well, we just need to fire them. Well, I challenge as a servant leader, if you really are being radical as a leader, you're going to not just give them a pink slip, you're going to say, let me help you
That's
find
right.
where you fit either in a different place in our organization or somebody we know somewhere else. And when we do that and do it well, not
Mhm.
only for that person, but then our team's going, holy
That's right.
smoke, this guy's really serious about this. And it makes such a huge impact. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, sharing vision is such a key thing, or as the way you put it, sharing a goal. I
Mhm.
know they're similar.
Mhm.
So, other practical tips you think of to help in being a supportive leader?
Well, yeah, I think I just finished a podcast series where I actually, and I should have said this while Anton was on, I went through the 14 Marine Corps leadership traits.
Oh, yeah.
And when I got to the end, as I was going through that, I realized, you know what, I believe there's one missing. And so I added a 15th one. It's not in the Marine Corps manual, obviously, but
Uh-oh. We
I said,
won't tell
look, this,
anybody.
this is the trait that's missing. And that trait that is missing is humility, right?
Ah,
Humility is missing from the 14. And so what I talked about, humility is basically this idea of you have a modest or even low viewpoint or view of your own importance, right?
Mm.
And if you're going to be a supportive leader, you have to be a humble leader. You
Yep.
have to have a lower viewpoint of yourself than you do your team. And one of the things that I do I need these triggers. I need mental triggers, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
that keeps my ego in check and keeps me humble as a leader. And so I just make up these little phrases, and I'm so adamant about these phrases that I will say them out loud to myself. And I even get caught at times by team members saying these things to myself. But when I'm going into a situation where I know it's important that I'm patient with my team, that I
Mm-hmm.
hear my team out, that I don't just go in kind of with an ego and go in with a command and control type of attitude.
Right.
I will, as I'm walking to that conference room or to that meeting or whatever, I will literally say out loud to myself, the team is more important than me.
Mm-hmm.
The team is more important than me. And I'll just repeat that to myself, because what that's doing is that's getting me into a humble mindset that I can then go and lead my team with that versus an ego that's blown out of proportion and a command and control kind of attitude with my team. So that's my practical advice that I use, right, to be supportive, is I just remind myself of things like that. This team, they're more important than me.
Well, and at the end, if we have a strong vision, a strong vision means I can't do it alone.
That's right. That's right.
Because if I can do it alone, I've got a very low level goal.
Yes.
If I've got a strong vision, it's something I can't do alone, and I go, I need these people.
That's right.
It can't just be me. And you're right. Humility. One of the things I share is there's 3 core components to servant leader, and that is responsibility, acceptance, and humility. And if you can't get your head around that personally, it's got to start personally, by the way. This is not, because from my perspective, job's a subset to life. If we don't approach these things with our life and become servant leaders as a lifestyle, not a leadership style, we're going to be challenged. So, well, I know we're winding down. Michael, tell the audience a little bit about what you have, how they can get a hold of you, and get engaged with you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Kevin. I mean, obviously, you can find me here on LinkedIn. Of all the social media platforms, LinkedIn is probably my most active. So I'm happy to connect with anyone here on LinkedIn. You can find everything that we do associated with leadership development, leadership training at credibleleaders.com. We have live events coming up. In fact, we have one coming up this coming Friday. We have tools like our leadership calculator that's there. We have podcast episodes that are there. So lots of content there at credibleleaders.com. You can find everything we're doing, and reach out to me. I'd love to connect and chat even more. I don't want to be hiding behind some website. So find me on LinkedIn and hit me up with a chat, and I'd love to connect with folks deeper.
I would encourage you to do so. I've had a chance to talk with Michael one-on-one, and what you're seeing today is what I got to see one-on-one. Nothing hidden there, just all real. And I encourage you. And I actually tried out the leadership calculator. I encourage you to give it a shot. I know Michael's worked hard on that, and I think it's an effective tool. And then, of course, just a reminder that if you want to engage with Perspective Force and become part of the #HumanSOS movement, go to perspectiveforce.com, reach out to Anton, myself, check out our page. And then we also have an assessment, and it's more, it's related to leadership, but more on the area of stress. And take that assessment, and it will help you use it with your team. It's free. And if you decide to do so with a team, if you'll let us know, we will even offer a free session to do some interpretation of the results and share it with it. So we're out there. Reach out. If you can't figure out how to get a hold of Michael, you can reach me. I'll get you in touch with him. And so thank you, everyone. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Beats me what happened. I have yet to be able to find and see the technical gremlins out there. But we appreciate you hanging with us. We'll be back next week, Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern, right here on LinkedIn. Invite others and join us. Love to have you. Thanks for the comments, everyone that shared thoughts today. So God bless. Have an amazing week, and we'll look forward to seeing you next Tuesday. See you, everybody.